Good day everyone! Welcome to our video presentation regarding product-oriented performance-based assessment. So keep your ears and eyes on focus for it will help you a lot, especially in answering the activity that we will give you later. So the rest of the discussion will be further discussed by my group mates, so keep on focus.
Product-oriented performance-based assessment is a kind of assessment wherein the assessor views and scores the final product made and not on the actual performance making of the product. It is concerned on the product alone and not on the process. It is more concerned also to the outcome or the performance of the learner. It is also focuses on the achievement of the learner. The learning competencies associated with products or outputs are linked with an assessment with 3 levels of performance manifested by the product, namely novice or beginner's level, skilled level, and the last one is the expert level. There are other ways to state product-oriented learning competencies. For instance, we can define learning competencies for products or outputs in the following way. Level 1, which is the beginner level. Does the finished product or project illustrate the minimum expected parts or functions? Level 2, which is the skilled level. Does the finished product or project contain additional parts and functions on top of the minimum requirements which tend to enhance the final project? Level 3, which is the expert level. Does the finished product contain the basic minimum parts and functions, have additional features on top of the minimum, and aesthetically pleasing? Here are some examples. Example: the product desired is a scrapbook illustrating the historical event called EDSA 1, People Power. Learning competencies: the scrapbook presented by the students must: first, for the beginners, it must contain pictures, newspaper clippings, and other illustrations for the main characters of EDSA 1 People Power, namely Corazon Aquino, Fidel V. Ramos, Juan Ponce Enrile, Ferdinand E. Marcos, etc. That is for the minimum specification. While on the skilled level, it must contain remarks and captions for the illustrations made by the students himself for the roles played by the characters of EDSA 1 People Power. And thus the third level, which is the expert level, it must be presentable, complete, and informative, and pleasing to the reader of the scrapbook. Performance-based assessment for products and projects can also be used for assessing outputs for short-term tasks such as the one illustrated below for outputs in a typing class. Example: the desired output consists of the output in a typing class. Learning competencies: the final typing outputs of the students must, for the beginners, possess no more than 5 errors in spelling, while on the skilled level, possess no more than 5 errors in spelling while observing proper format based on the document to be typewritten. While on the expert level, possess no more than 5 errors in spelling, has the proper format, and it is readable and presentable. Notice that in all of the given examples, product-oriented performance-based learning competencies are evidence-based. The teacher needs concrete evidence that the students has achieved a certain level of competence based on submitted products and projects.
Now let's proceed with the second and the third subtopics under the product-oriented performance-based assessment, which are the task designing as well as the scoring rubrics. Should a teacher design a task for a product-oriented performance-based assessment? The design of the task in product-oriented performance-based assessment depends on the teacher's desires to observe the outputs of the students. Task designing falls under the following concepts which should be considered by the teachers. These include the complexity, the appeal, the creativity, as well as the goal-based.
Complexity. The level of complexity of the project needs to be within the range of ability of the students. Projects that are too simple tend to be uninteresting for the students, while projects that are too complicated will most likely frustrate them. Second is the appeal. The project or activity must be appealing to the students. It should be interesting enough so that students are encouraged to pursue the task to completion. It should lead to self-discovery of information by the students. The third one is the creativity. The project needs to encourage students to exercise creativity and divergent thinking. Given the same set of materials and project inputs, how does one best present the project? It should lead the students into exploring the various possible ways of presenting the final output. And lastly, the goal-based. The teacher must bear in mind that the project is produced in order to attain a learning objective. Thus, projects are assigned to students not just for the sake of producing something, but for the purpose of reinforcing learning.
So according to Brookhart 1999, scoring rubrics are the descriptive scoring schemes that are developed by the teachers or other evaluators to guide the analysis of the products or the processes of students' efforts. So usually, we are using the scoring rubrics to set a standard to be attained by the students, especially in their final output.
Alright, under scoring rubrics, we have criteria setting. The criteria for scoring rubrics are statements which identify what really counts in the final output. Quality, creativity, comprehensiveness, accuracy, and aesthetics. So these are the major criteria that we often heard or encounter in product assessment. So each criteria should contain sub-statements for it will make the major criteria more focused and objective. So for example, we are scoring an essay on 300 years of Spanish rule in the Philippines. So let's say for instance, the major criterion is quality. So quality may possess the following sub-statements. First, interrelates the chronological events in an interesting manner. Second, identifies the key players in each period of the Spanish rule and the roles that they played. And the last one is succeeds in relating the history of Philippine Spanish rule, rated as professional, not quite professional, and novice. So substatements explain what major criteria means. So it will be the guide in assessing the product. Okay, let me give you a clear example of criteria setting. Here it goes like. Okay, the scoring rubrics in this particular example exemplifies what is called a holistic scoring rubric. Okay, it will be noted that each score category describes the characteristics of a response that would receive the respective score. Describing the characteristics of responses within each score category increases the likelihood that two independent evaluators would assign the same score to a given response. So, in effect, this increases the objectivity of the assessment procedure using rubrics. In the language of test and measurement, we are actually increasing the inter-rater reliability. Okay? So now the question is, when are scoring rubrics an appropriate evaluation technique? Okay, grading essays is just one example of performances that may be evaluated using scoring rubrics. So there are many other instances in which scoring rubrics may be used successfully, so such as evaluating group activities, extended projects, and oral presentations. Also, rubrics scoring cuts across disciplines and subject matter, for they are equally appropriate to English, mathematics, and science classrooms. Alright? So where and when a scoring rubric is used does not depend on the grade level or subject, but rather on the purpose of the assessment. So I hope you get it.
Authentic assessment schemes apart from scoring rubrics exist in the arsenal of a teacher. For example, checklists may be used rather than scoring rubrics in the evaluation of essays. Checklists enumerate a set of desirable characteristics for a certain product, and the teacher marks those characteristics which are actually observed. As such, checklists is an appropriate criteria for evaluation when the information that is sought is limited to the determination of whether or not specific criteria have been met. On the other hand, scoring rubrics are based on the descriptive scales and support of the evaluation and the extent to which criteria have been met. The ultimate consideration of using scoring rubrics for assessment is really the purpose of the assessment. The scoring rubrics provide at least two benefits in the evaluation process. First, they support the examination of the extent to which the specified criteria have been reached. Second, they provide feedback to students concerning how to improve their performances. If these benefits are consistent with the purpose of assessment, then a scoring rubric is likely to be an appropriate evaluation technique. General versus task-specific. In the development of the scoring rubrics, it is well to bear in mind that it can be used to assess or evaluate specific tasks or general tasks or broad category of tasks. For instance, suppose that we are interested in assessing the student's oral communication skills. Then, a general scoring rubric may be developed and used to evaluate such of the oral presentation given by that student. After each such oral presentation of the student, the general scoring rubrics are shown to the students, which then allow them to improve on the previous performances. Scoring rubrics have this advantage of instantaneously providing a mechanism for immediate feedback.
So good evening everyone, my name is Danica Caberte and I am going to tackle about the process of developing scoring rubrics. So, the development of scoring rubrics goes through a process. The first step in the process is the identification of qualities and attributes that a teacher wishes to to observe in the students' outputs that would demonstrate their level of proficiency, according to Brooklyn 1999. So, once it is done, a decision has to be made whether holistic or analytical rubric would be appropriate in the assessment. So, when we say analytical scoring rubric, each criterion is considered one by one, and the descriptions of the scoring levels are made separately. So, the result of this scoring rubric would be separate descriptive scoring schemes, while on the other hand, holistic scoring rubrics is the collection of criteria is considered throughout the construction of each level of the scoring rubric. So, the result of this scoring rubric would be single descriptive scoring scheme. So, once you have done or you have made up your mind which of these two you are going to use in your assessment, here is the next step. So the next step is the identification and definition of the criteria for the lowest level of performance. So this is for the teacher to know what could be the worst performance of the student and to capture the criteria that would suit in the middle level performance of the concept being measured. So it is possible to make greater distinctions between performances. So, comparing performances of the students will surely help the teacher to know if there is any progress in the learning of the child. So, the teacher ought to compare those results of the scoring rubrics that has been used in the past performances of the child, and it can be done until the desired number of score levels had been reached. So that's it. So, a note of caution, it is suggested that each category should be defined using descriptors of the work rather than value judgment about the work, according to Brooklyn 1999. So, for example, student sentences contain no errors in subject-verb agreement is preferable over. So, student sentences are good. The phrase are good requires the evaluator to make a judgment, whereas the phrase no errors is quantifiable. Finally, we can test whether our scoring rubrics is reliable by asking 2 or more teachers to have the same set of projects or outputs and correlate their individual assessments. So high correlations between the raters imply high inter-rater reliability. So the result of our scoring rubrics would be more reliable if other teachers will also agree to the judgment that we give in the performance of the children. So that's it. So now let's come up to the resources that we have in terms of scoring rubrics. So there is a broad range of scoring of resources available to teachers who wish to use scoring rubrics in their classrooms. So the following are the examples of resources of scoring rubrics. So the first one is for K-12 teachers, we have the State of Colorado 1998, it is a kind of holistic scoring rubrics that are designed for the evaluation of writing assessment. Next is the Chicago Public Schools, also a holistic scoring rubrics that span a broad array of subjects in K-12 program. Next is 1997A, 1997B, a Danielson and Marquez 1998 scoring rubrics for elementary, middle, and high school mathematics classrooms. So those are examples of scoring rubrics. So the next resources that I will mention are the resources that college instructors can be used. So the first is KT Schools Guide for Education 2000. Next is The Art and Science of Classroom Assessment, The Missing Part of Pedagogy, Brooklyn 1999. Another one is Moscow 1999, which is a website that contains link of college assessment resources and including scoring rubrics. Another one is Eric Clearinghouse on Assessment and Evaluation. And the last one is Scoring Rubrics, Definition and Constructions 2000. So those are the resources that we have in terms of scoring rubrics. So that is my topic, and thank you for listening.